Welcome to RVing in New England, the nation's only forum that puts you on stage with some of the biggest names in the RV industry. And now your hosts, John DePietro and Bob Zagami.
There you go.
Woo!
Wow, so slick. Only took me about 2 years to figure it out.
Amazing. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome once again to RVing in New England. It is our 11th year.
By the time we get to 10 years, we'll be celebrating our 20th anniversary.
I know. Every week it goes up by another year. But the crazy thing is, we want to thank our sponsor for this show, which is Seacoast RVs on Route 1 in Saco, Maine. They have crop models, they have elevation models, they have Winnebago models, and they create family fun on Route 1. So if you're looking for a Christmas gift for the RVer and your family, that might be the place to go. They've got one of the nicest stores. I'm sure you'd agree, Bob. The nicest stores in New England.
They'll get themselves a gift certificate. So tonight we should do a little preamble for tonight. You know, there's a lot of talk in the industry about regulations that are coming out in California, and I don't want to sound like I know what I'm talking about because I don't. And this thing is over my head. But we did get an expert tonight, Chris Dougherty, the RV PhD, and Dougherty Consulting here in Springfield, Mass. So we should bring him up right away because we're going to be over our shoes in about 5 minutes.
But first, this is today on NBC. I see Ryan Hadley, and Ryan is celebrating his 5th anniversary in business. And last weekend, Ryan and I and his family gathered at St. John's Food for the Poor in Worcester, and Ryan presented a very hefty check to Father John Madden, and also made an offer to anyone who made a donation to St. John's that he would give them, if you made a $25 donation or more, he'd give you a $25 gift certificate for any services in the next season coming up. So congratulations to Ryan for, Bob, we were talking earlier today about Campers Inn and how they're so civic minded, and so many of our dealers, I know Hemlock Hill does a lot of stuff with Make-A-Wish Foundation, and all of our dealers do an excellent job in giving back to the community. So
well, there was an opportunity tonight on Fox Brett Baer. They did a small piece on the hills of North Carolina, and they're working with a company called Group Hilo. And it was a company that was mentioned in the Campers Inn press release.
Right.
Campers Inn donated 32 trailers. Well, they had a parade of trailers going up into the hills, and they had 126 trailers that were going up for people that are sitting there in tents and cold weather and floods and what have you. So they must have got a lot of the dealers around North Carolina to
chip in
that excess inventory. So that was another good one. So who else we got? Who's woken up? Tim is. Geez, this must be the drawing power of Chris Dougherty. It may also be the first night that Tim Christensen has ever been on time for the program. So I'll credit the respect that he has for Mr. Dougherty. Gail Hogan, good evening, Gail and Steve. Bernie Culloden, hello from the metropolis of Nashua, New Hampshire. Okay. Maria Galante Moore, hello, Maria. Glad you're there. Ryan says thanks, and thanks for your help. Glad to help, Ryan. It was such a great program. Now, Ryan.
Wait. What the hell did you do? I did all the work.
What did I do?
Yeah.
I posted it all over the world.
Oh, okay. Good.
I even posted your video. You didn't see it?
Yeah, I did. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, you posted it, then I posted it too.
Right.
Maybe we should play it tonight.
Art is here. Hello from Altoona.
From Altoona, Pennsylvania.
She's at the McDonald's right now.
She's at the McDonald's.
Are you sitting in his booth that they grabbed him at?
It's still got police lines, do not cross tape all over it.
Talking RVs, gentlemen. Now, is that Michelle or is that Randy? Sounds
That's
like it
Randy.
might be Michelle. I'm guessing it's Michelle.
Nope, it's Randy.
Huh?
Yeah.
It's Randy. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, he only says gentleman. What the hell? He's only talking to Chris?
I guess.
Randy, gentlemen, please. Thank you.
One more quick public service announcement. You get this one, John.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm saying, what's that? Okay, so on Thanksgiving night, our friend Ben Quiggle, who's been a frequent guest on this show, was having a fire in his farmhouse in southern Michigan, and his son went outside to look for something and looked up and saw the house was on fire. So he came back in and told the rest of the family. They had extensive smoke and water damage throughout the house. It's not livable. And if you want to donate to the GoFundMe page, you know what? You might not be able to click it there, but just go to GoFundMe Quiggle, Quiggle, and you'll find it. He put a $20,000 goal on. It's already at $35,000. But Ben is such a conservative person that I don't think he realized how much it's going to cost him to either fix that house or to build a new one. But there's talk of him getting a temporary RV to live in because he has farm animals on that property. So, you know what? I made a donation.
Me too.
And I feel good. And hi, Rick Kessler, who is Ben's boss. And I'm sure Rick will be the first to say that Ben hasn't missed a drop of work because I see his Woodall Campground notes out every day, which is pretty amazing.
He's a hard worker.
So,
all right. So
anyway, hi, Kessler.
Hey, Rick.
We have what Chris had done is do an entire seminar on this subject. Now, obviously, we can't do the whole seminar tonight, but we're going to pick out a few of the slides to talk about it. Chris, why don't you give kind of an overview of, and we're doing well on attendees tonight, so I think there's a lot of interest, but there's also a lot of confusion.
And Chris, keep in mind that you got to talk down to us for us to understand, because you understand all that technical stuff.
Oh,
So
Mr. I don't read
crap
my
about
RV
this
owner's
stuff.
manual.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But maybe we have to understand up. So
Sorry.
Yeah,
I had to pick on you when I could.
Funny story. Chris and I were both on the RVIA seminar last week, I think it was. And about halfway through, when I realized that I really didn't understand any of this stuff, I texted Chris and I said, I don't understand anything these guys are saying. So I said, you got to bring it down. So at least if John and I can understand it, then I'm sure our fans will be a step ahead of us.
Our audience.
And be ready. My guess, the first question will come from Walter, although I haven't seen him up in the chat yet, so I'm not sure he's in. Or could come from Tim. Go ahead, take it away, Chris.
All right. So where this came out some time ago was it got out in the RV news world that Newmar had sent out some letters to dealers in the affected states saying after January 1st, we can't sell you any new motorhomes. And of course, that just puts a light bulb on. And so it kind of caught my interest, and obviously a lot of other people. So there's been a lot of comments out there, about it. And so what I decided to do was put this thing together. I did go to RVIA's webcast last week, which was very informative, but I dove into it a little bit more, and especially for our audience here, looking at it from a standpoint of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which was supposed to go online with this January 1st, and they're not. So take a deep breath. It's on hold. But I thought I would explain what CARB is, why we're paying attention to it, and we can take a look at it and see how it's going to affect our business and our lifestyle as RVers.
Chris, I got it.
Going down the road.
I got it. My doctor said to me, "You're eating too many carbs." Is that what he meant?
Yeah, no, not carbs, just carb.
Okay.
So yeah, but
I thought I had it.
There's too much carb.
His comedy is not much better than his RV stuff. So,
if we can go ahead and start with a couple of slides, and then I assume people can hear me while the slides are up.
yes, they can.
So, let's take a look at this. So, what is CARB? CARB is the California Air Resources Board. And there's an interesting story about it, behind it, and how it got to where it is. So, back in 1967, they formed it because there were times in the LA Valley, Los Angeles, basin, where people couldn't even see their neighbors because of the smoke. That's how bad it was. And so they started looking into it, and they thought it was industrial pollution from plants and things. And they said, nope, it's not. Sorry, it's motor vehicles. And that's how this whole thing got started. And so the catalytic converter you're familiar with all comes out of this. And so it's the most advanced environmental, they are the most advanced environmental rules in the country, more than the EPA. And there are 10 states which have adopted this, and we're going to talk about that tonight. Massachusetts being one of them, Vermont, Rhode Island, and New York in our immediate vicinity. And so that's worth mentioning and talking about. Okay, so the next one, again, as I mentioned earlier, and Bob mentioned, the RV Industry Association did a webinar, and they actually have it in the public side of the news area, the media area on the website. And so you can go to that and you can see the entire webcast. You can also download the slides and everything else and see what they're talking about. And they're updating that page.
This webcast.
Yeah. Well, it's not just the webcast, right? So this is a main article that they wrote back when this whole thing started happening, and they've been updating it as they've had meetings with the CARB people and to bring this up. So to be clear, they are concentrating on California, right? So they say California, it's California, but understand that there are 10 states in the country that have adopted CARB's rules that have been granted a waiver by the EPA. They have to be, the rules that are adopted have to be a minimum of what EPA's standards are. And then if they put a CARB rule out and it's higher, whatever else, EPA will give them an exemption. And then the other 10 states, the 10 states altogether will have that exemption.
Chris,
yes.
How, because one of the takeaways that I had was California leads the parade.
Mm-hmm.
Any other state wants to do it, they have to do it by the California rule. And that was what came out of the whole national thing. Can you explain how does something like that happen? I study politics and I listen to all this stuff, but how does a national rule get to, one state get to decide? Can you shine any light on that?
Sure. So the EPA has a couple of rules in there, and I do address it in my slides. And so there's a rule that states that.
Not that one.
No, it's number 6. It shows it, and it should have a rule of 7507 new motor vehicle emission standards in non-attainment areas. And
I don't think I did. I don't think I did. Okay. I did the weight. I didn't do the standards chart. I didn't take all the slides.
Yeah, I know. I number 5. It was. I thought I saw 5 and 6 in the list that you wanted to do, but at any rate, so there were other states that were interested in taking this on and to have the higher emission standards in their state. And so what the EPA did was they said, okay, you can do that. You can accept these standards such as long as such standards are identical to the California standards for which a waiver has been granted for such model year, and California and such state adopts such standards at least 2 years before commencement of such model year. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of little rules that go on that go into this, right? And so the way it happens is the California Air Resources Board sets a rule, and then there's a whole process by which it goes through an approval process in their own state, and then when they put it up there, then the EPA has to grant waivers for each section of the rule. And if they grant a waiver that's saying to the 10 states that are part of this thing that you are allowed to obey those rules and not the EPA's, okay? And so as I understand it, the rules have to be at least, equivalent to the EPA standards, if not above. And this waiver has to be in place, and that's where one of the kind of gray areas is right now, because one of these rules doesn't have an EPA waiver, so it can't be enforced yet. That's one of the things that they're looking at. So go ahead.
Take a step back. The
Mm-hmm.
way the law is written right now, California is going to go into effect January 1st, or have there been any stays or exemptions? Talk about what RVIA and RVDA, what is our industry doing to make sure this stuff doesn't happen? And so people like Newmar, Winnebago, Tiffin, who have had meetings with their dealers, obviously the dealers are looking at it. I mean, they could put some dealers out of business that sell only a Newmar product line or only a Tiffin product line. There's a lot of money to do that.
Just ask one question.
Yeah.
This is diesel only or diesel plus gas?
So I want to make this very clear, and this is an important part of this, and this was a question I asked in the RVIA webinar.
I know
This is not.
It is.
Here it is, guys. It's not about motorhomes. It's about engines. Okay. It's about chassis. So this is about any vehicle whose gross vehicle weight rating is 8,500 pounds and over, and of course uses an ICE powertrain or internal combustion engine. This includes pickup trucks and vans and all that sort of thing. Okay, so at the bottom level, we're talking, the industry's been talking about motorhomes, and they started out talking about diesels because a piece of this does have to do with the omnibus low NOx rule, or nitrogen oxide emissions. But you
want that slide?
that has to do with engines and things like that, which is its own issue because there's a limited number of those engines available.
Chris, do you want this slide up, or is that?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we can do that. But it's also pickup trucks and vans and everything else. 8,500 pound gross vehicle weight rating and above. So it's important to keep that in mind. And that was something that I brought up in the RVIA webinar because it affects everybody in this space, not just the motorhome people. Okay.
Well, and to your point, I mean, when they said motorhomes, I think a lot of the people in the industry thought of the big diesel pushers,
Mm-hmm.
but every Sprinter diesel van is more than 8,500 pounds.
Sure. Now, there are little bits and pieces to this. I don't want to get in the weeds. We only have an hour, right?
Yeah.
The big diesel engines have a bigger issue with the low NOx rules. Okay. So that rule has to do with other engines that are available. And so the availability of those is an issue. But what we're looking at here on a bigger level is the advanced clean truck ruling, right? So the advanced clean truck is all about, in the fleet rule, which is the third one, have to do with replacing ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, with zero emission vehicles, or ZEVs. Okay. So since this rule came into effect, there is a ramp up to 2036 that by 2036, no ICE vehicles will be sold in California and thereby theoretically in the other 9 states. One of the things that I want to mention with this rule is the states that are part of this, they have to adopt the rules as written, but they don't have to adopt them when they're adopted in California. Okay, so they can have an emergency ruling to push off the adoption of the regulations, which is what's happened in a majority of the states and has happened here in the Commonwealth as of a month ago or so. But the hearings this week were about that. So they put the hold in place. They've had hearings about it, and there's a lot of stuff that has to do with municipalities. I listened to a lot of these people, and we can talk a little bit more about that later. But there are some real issues with, especially with heavy truck people, trying to put these rules in place. So the infrastructure and everything just isn't there. And so that's becoming a bigger issue.
Talk a little bit about, did you go to that meeting on the 14th?
I did. And so I didn't stay for the whole thing. I listened to a number of, it was put on by Mass DEP.
Yeah.
And I listened to testimony from a number of, I didn't even wait for the commercial people to come on. I know what we need to do as far as the RV industry is concerned. And I heard a lot from people across the Commonwealth that were talking about why they can't implement this and what the costs are to it. And so there were some big takeaways from that. One of which, so let's look at it from the basics. If I have to get a zero emission vehicle, that means a battery powered vehicle, which means I have to charge it. Even outside of Boston, the towns that are the cities that are right outside of Boston, the metro area, didn't have the infrastructure, would not have the infrastructure to charge these things. Okay. That was a big thing. Newton, for instance, asked for 5 years. Why don't you run down from the top to the bottom? Okay.
So people don't lose us trying to figure out where you are.
Okay, sure. So the public hearing, there's an infrastructure. So this is some of the high points that I took out of it. First of all, the infrastructure is not adequate to switch to zero emission vehicles. And so there are exemptions in place already for a number of types of vehicles, and emergency vehicles are a big piece of it, right? So trucks, fire trucks, ambulances, school buses that are owned by municipalities or school districts are exempt at this point. One of the things that they found in trying to replace fleet vehicles, and they're trying to get an exemption for all public service vehicles because your DPWs still have an emergency response aspect to them. And right now they're not included in the exemption. But to replace a fleet vehicle in DPW, let's just say a dump truck with a snowplow on it, right? The cost of the vehicles double the cost for a battery, basically a battery powered dump truck. And you lose 30% of the carrying capacity of the truck because of the weight of the batteries. So not only are these things, first of all, they're not available for years. I mean, the manufacturer's saying, you want to order this now, you're going to get it 2 or 3 years down the road. But they're also saying that you're going to lose 30% of your carrying capacity and your use of it. So now the municipalities have to look at it and saying, okay, now, so not only is it double the cost for the vehicle, but now I have to replace 30%, add to 30% to my fleet, my manpower, in order to pave a road, because the trucks can't carry as much tar and this kind of thing. There's a lot of little pieces to this, right?
30% more vehicles use 30% more gas and repairs.
Well, it doesn't, no, but they can't carry as much, right? So I have to take that truck and put it back on charge.
Okay.
So it doesn't last as long. So I can't sit there and just refuel it and put it back on the road. Now I have to kind of replace this thing in my fleet. And it just ends up, being a little bit bigger issue, right? Yeah. So that's one thing. The second thing about it is that there's not enough infrastructure. So even in the Boston area, National Grid, Eversource, they're saying, we can't provide you enough power to put in charging stations to charge these big trucks, right? So watts in, watts out. When you're dealing with batteries, that's what it is. And so your electrical grid has to be able to support this. And this is a big piece of it when you're talking about RVs, is being able to recharge these things, right? And so that was a big piece of it. They're asking for more years to come out with this. One of the municipalities here in Western Mass got on there and said, our electrical grid in some areas of Western Mass is so weak, people can't charge an electric car. How are you going to tell those towns that now they have to spend all this money and they have to put these trucks in when there isn't enough of a grid there to even charge an electric car? Okay. And so you got in the mountain towns and stuff like that. It's, you can see it. It's weak. And so that's a real concern.
Let me ask you a question, and it'll show you how little I know about this stuff. Are we, as the RV industry, at the mercy of the trucking industry? In other words, when these states get exemptions and get pushed down the road 2 or 3 years, then do we slide along with them? And if that starts happening, how soon do consumers rest and say this isn't really going to be it's not going to be an issue for a couple of years? I mean, did motorhomes or the RV industry get represented at that hearing?
No, they didn't. Now there were 2 sets of hearings, one earlier in the day, one later in the day. I was at the one that was earlier in the day, so I don't know. I didn't see anybody on the list who looked like they were there from the RV industry. And to be clear, this was about postponing the rule for at least 1 model year. So as of the ruling that stands in the Commonwealth right now is that this is going to push off to the 2026 model year. So we're going to look at the summer, right, for it to take effect. Again, I want to make it clear, though, we're not just talking about motorhomes. We're talking about pickup trucks. You asked a minute ago, are we at the mercy of the trucking industry? We're not at the mercy of the trucking industry, but here's the thing. And we're going to talk about this a little bit. So there's a credit system. So when we look at this Advanced Clean Truck ruling, is that manufacturers get credits for selling zero emission vehicles in a state that is part of CARB, right? Now, right now, each state has their own, but they have agreed to a ruling that's going to pool them all together. So all 10 states, all the CARB points are going to be together. But here's the thing. If you're going to sell it was supposed to start with 2024. Again, most have pushed it out. But when this goes into effect, okay, if I'm going to sell an ICE vehicle, an internal combustion vehicle, in one of these states, and we'll say Massachusetts just for now, or California, I have to offset that with a zero emission vehicle. So I get credit for zero emission vehicles, and I get to spend those credits selling ICE vehicles.
So if you had the type of business where you could sell 500 electric vehicles and 500 gas vehicles, then you're okay?
Okay, to be clear, I don't know the ratio. So I can't answer if I'm Ford, and Ford and Rivian have the most points. So they're about 4,500, 5,000 points, something along those lines, but some of the numbers are dated back a little bit.
I don't think they can read that, Chris, but tell them what that is.
Well, let me finish. Let me just finish one other thing before we do that. So I don't know how many points they get for it, but those 2 companies have the most, and so they have this little container of chips, right, and to spend. And the thing about these credits is they're on an open market. So a company like Rivian that doesn't have any ICE vehicles at all, they have all these chips. Guess what? They can put them in the bank. They can put them out for sale to companies that make ICE vehicles, and they can buy those at whatever market rate. So I mean, Rivian can charge a lot of money for it or give them away. It's an open market, so they can sell more ICE vehicles in a given state. So there are companies, though, Stellantis, which is Ram, General Motors, Chevrolet, GMC, have very limited amounts. Daimler has very limited amounts. Okay, Daimler includes Mercedes, but it's also Freightliner. So when we look at these big trucks and the big motorhomes, that's where this really becomes interesting, because not only do you have the restrictions on the engines for 525 horsepower and over, but you also have a limit on, now once these rules go into place, the manufacturers have got to say, okay, to sell a chassis into that state. So it's going to, I'm going to have to pay chips to do that. And I only have so many, or I have none at all. And that's why they're not available. And when that manufacturer sits there and says, I can do this, and there's more to it than that, but we've got a limited amount of time, but I'm going to have to put my money where it counts. I'm going to have to put my chips where they count. And for these guys, whether it's Ford or Ram or GM or Daimler, whoever, they're going to be looking at that commercial truck business. And even Ford, they've got a lot of points. But what's the most popular vehicle out there, especially among commercial people? Ford. The F-Series. And so that's what we're going to be looking at down the road, because they need to keep everybody else in those trucks.
Chris, how is this? There are two things. Bob had asked a question earlier. Is the RV industry being held hostage or something to that effect? The reality is,
by the trucking industry, he asked.
Right, but the RV industry does not create chassis. They buy them from manufacturers. So the reality is, unless they build their own chassis,
won't make any difference.
They're stuck. They're stuck.
So here's the deal. So when you have an unfinished,
Ford, one other at the same time, and maybe you can give me to the same answer. Are used vehicles impacted by this, or is somebody going to be stuck with a used vehicle?
No, not at all. Okay. And that's one of the things, and I'll answer that first, is that this is only about new vehicles, and the definition of a new vehicle is a vehicle that has under 7,500 miles on it.
Okay.
So new vehicles that are produced that can go into these states, the certificate of origin for that vehicle, whether it's a chassis or a completed vehicle, is going to say for sale in Massachusetts, for sale in California or New York or whatever. Important point to make there.
It has to be labeled. It has to be on that vehicle.
It's on the certificate of origin, and there will be a label on the vehicle that will state that. Okay.
Chris, can we do this? I don't want to leave our fans out in left field.
We got a bunch of questions.
Sure. Yes.
You're going to do this break, Bob?
Huh?
You're going to do this break at 7:30?
No, we'll skip the break. Let's see, where did we leave off? We got Dante, evening. Sorry for being late. Tim.
Audrey.
Nice one, Chris. RV owner's manual. Yeah, nobody reads them. I caught that.
Well, we know John doesn't. So.
He's late. Very, very into talk.
Look at him shake his head. He's all upset about it.
Willie Miller.
Love your brother.
Even Willie wanted to know what's going on. But come on. Ban RVs while private jets and semi-trucks produce a gazillion times more carbon dioxide emissions. So dumb. Well, that's a good point. Go ahead, Chris. Answer him.
Yep. So it is semi-trucks. So to be clear, these rules are about Class 2B all the way up through Class 8. So Class 8's a semi. Class 2B are pickup trucks and smaller vehicles that have a gross vehicle weight rating of 8,500 pounds and up. So I think it's 8,500 to 10, but I don't remember all the little numbers off the top of my head, but there's a chart for it. But I totally agree with you. RVs don't get used as frequently as heavy trucks and that type of thing. And interestingly enough, Class 8 trucks are on kind of the lower scale. They're not as concerned about them. When you look at, there's a chart that's up there that shows where they want those emissions and those ZEV exchanges and that type of thing. Their big emphasis is on last mile vehicles, what they call last mile vehicles, right? So your delivery trucks, Amazon, UPS, FedEx, the guys who deliver beer and water and the electricians and
The last mile. They go from
all the last mile guys,
from
right?
the closest regional warehouse to the house.
To the house, to the neighborhood, to the
Yep.
commercial establishment, your distributors who distribute stuff to stores, things like that. Those vehicles start and stop a lot, and they also idle a lot. And they are also congested in a lot of cases in urban areas, which the smog issue is heavier there.
Yeah.
And so that's where you have that
Chris,
greater issue.
You used the term Class A truck. Define a
Class
A.
8. Class 8.
Okay.
The number 8. Yep.
Okay.
And so there's different classes of trucks in vehicles. Okay. They go from 1 to 8. And these rules is specifically, and that's where this comes in. So we're talking about Class 2B. Okay. So that's going to be 8,500 pounds and over. So some of the rating charts that you see, they don't talk specifically about Class 2B, but they divide Class 2 in half. So it's 8,500 to 10,000 pounds in every vehicle over that. So, and this is all by gross vehicle weight rating. So a lot of our motorhomes, they have a GVWR over 33,000 pounds. They're going to be Class 8 trucks. You know, you have your big diesels and stuff like that have the tag axles and whatever else. Those are Class 8 trucks at the end of the day.
So,
and
from a layman's standpoint, Chris, to Willie's point, Willie calls out the RVs, but to Chris's point before, this isn't about the RVs; it's about the chassis and the engines. If Freightliner tomorrow came out with an electric vehicle chassis, then every RV manufacturer would buy it. There wouldn't be an issue. I think the biggest problem with this is, number one, our government's involved. And number two, they're not being realistic about it. Our industry should have been much more aggressive at the beginning to get an exemption. Yes, they wrote letters about it and said motorhomes are different. My personal feeling is this industry should have been a lot more aggressive when they saw this on the horizon. But again, the engine and the chassis that are causing the issue. That's why Newmar got on the phone right away with their dealers and said, hey, based on what we have now in California, based on the rules that they got, unless we get exemptions, we're not going to be able to sell Newmar motorhomes to you in California.
Or Massachusetts or New York or wherever. Yeah. And I keep repeating that, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I want a lot of the concentration has been on California. Everybody says California, California, California. There are 10 states that are at some point going to be adopting this. And they have the ability to push off the adoption of the rules in time. And so there's a lot of that's happened with this.
I would think, Chris, that when you look at where do most of our motorhomes go, most of the vehicles that are applicable under these laws, if they're effective, it's going to be California, it's going to be Florida, it's going to be Texas. It's going to be those big states where large numbers, and that's when the politicians will come out and the dealers will get up in arms.
Well, and what this comes into, right, is as the rules read right now, and to be clear, the EPA has some different numbers, which I'm not going to get into. I did look at their rules a little bit, and there's been some changes in their rules in recent years. But the idea is that by 2036, these states will not sell any new vehicles that aren't zero emission vehicles. And so when I look at this from the RV standpoint, right, is that whether it's a pickup truck that's towing a travel trailer or it's a 45-foot Class A motor coach, is a lot of these campgrounds that are out there, and back in the day, I was a manager at one, and I've certainly been around them for a long time, is where are campgrounds? How many of them are in those urban centers where you have the most infrastructure? Not too many. Most campgrounds are in what? Rural areas. So to boost the electrical infrastructure, which is what's happening here in Massachusetts, even just outside of Boston, they don't have the electrical infrastructure to charge truck fleets of zero emission vehicles. and they don't have a timeline for it. According to Norwood, they're dealing with National Grid. They can't give them a time on it. Other people are dealing with
The source.
Eversource. There's so much that has to go into that. The last people that are going to get it are those people in those rural areas, and they're already dealing with the campgrounds having to put in sites that with 50, 30, 20 connections, right? So a 50 amp service is two legs, 50 amps a piece, 120 volts. That's basically 100 amps. If you got to do that times the number of sites you have, that's still a lot of energy. That's a lot of watts that you have to pack into this place. And now on top of that, that can't handle charging electric vehicles. And so now on top of that, you've got to add more infrastructure to charge electric vehicles. That's not something that's going to happen anytime in
Let's go back to
in the near future.
Let's go back to the audience. I got some good questions. Thank you, Audrey.
This is a brilliant audience tonight.
I am not sure what question I asked, but
Bob, go to Ryan's first, because that kind of right at the end. Go to the last one first at 7:43. Okay. And basically, I'll paraphrase what he's saying, because I own an electric car, and I will tell you point blank that the grid system right now, today, December 11th, 2024, is nowhere near what it needs to be just for the amount of vehicles that are sold today. Okay. Let alone adding 30% more vehicles.
Well, what's scary, though, not just adding 30% more vehicles, the numbers that you're talking today are all cars. When they
or F-150s.
What the hell they do with all the trucks?
Yeah. I see some.
And we're talking.
I see some Ford Rangers at the charging station, and I see some Rivians, but that's about it. And there's
unless people can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know that there's a electric Ranger, but the F-150 Lightning is their electric pickup truck.
Right.
But if they've come out with an electric Ranger, it's great. I'm not aware of it. I
don't think they are.
Try to follow Ford.
Yeah.
So I mean, to Ryan's point, right, is you have battery life is affected by weight and weather too much. In weather, aerodynamics are certainly an issue. Elevation. When you take let's say I take a tow vehicle out and put a trailer behind it, right? If I'm in Indiana and I'm on the toll road and it's flat and straight across the state, I can pretty much calculate that, and I can say, okay, you know what, it's going to be just fine. And even if I have some effect from lake effect wind or whatever the deal is, but it's a lot easier. Now I get out here in the weather we're having today in Western Mass and Eastern Mass too, and everything. We've got heavy winds, heavy rain, and now I got the Berkshires. I got all these other hills that we've got through here. I go into New York and the Adirondacks and the Catskills and all that, or Pennsylvania, West Virginia. When you start doing those elevations and you go out west, it's even more severe. When you start having to fight gravity going uphill, guess what you're going to do? You're going to drain those batteries real fast.
The range
Chris,
disappear.
Let me verify 100% what you just said, because a couple of years ago, I was on my way to Elkhart. Okay. And I said, I'll take the electric car this year. And I calculated based upon my vehicle, my mileage, all that other stuff, going from Worcester to Albany. And I said, I'll have 40% left. This is what the computer did. Okay. What it didn't take into account, and I was fine from Worcester to Springfield. But once I got to Westfield and I started hitting the hills, the mileage started going down real quick. And then when I got on the thruway, just to the other side of Albany, I had the headwinds, which always come west to east on the New York thruway. And it cut me down even more. Okay.
And that's just a car. Add the dimensions and the wind resistance of a large vehicle to that.
You got to take
and the additional weight.
And the other thing is ambient temperature of the air is another thing that has a huge impact on electric vehicle batteries.
Why
You
is
got
that?
elevation, air, and wind, headwinds.
All right, I'm going to swing back. I want to make sure, this is a good discussion, and if we just spent the rest of the night answering questions, that's okay, because that's
Mhm. Sure.
what we're here
Let's do
for.
it.
So Bernie says, so that means 3/4 ton trucks as well. Yes, right?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And it may mean, I'd have to look this up. It may mean some half-ton trucks.
Half ton. Yeah.
So the upper end of your F-150s and stuff that have the higher tow ratings may have a higher GVWR, but I'm not sure of that. You'd have to look at it. So it's, again, that 8,500 mark is really the key to it. So you can even have vans that are, above that for gross vehicle weight rating, and those are going to be included in this.
Okay. So Willie still loves us. That's good to know. Bernie comes back. As time goes on, can this affect the fifth wheel industry because of the limitations of the tow vehicle? Absolutely.
Absolutely. And that was that was kind of the point of my question at RVIA the other day that I wanted to bring up, is that, so here's what's going to happen. So when this goes into effect, again, right now, this is about new vehicles. Now, down the road, they can, of course, change this. And the idea can be that eventually the entire fleet of vehicles that are on the road have to be zero emission. But I don't see that in my lifetime, to be clear, but who knows? We've seen weirder stuff. So what that's going to mean is that new vehicles that are in this ruling, so 8,500 and up, are going to become rarer in those states. They're going to be harder to come by, and probably a little more expensive, right? Because they're going to have to fit into that box.
Yeah.
But what that's going to do also is going to create a bigger market for lightly used vehicles. So again, that 7,500 mile odometer reading, you get the 7501, and now it's a used vehicle, right? So and then I can import it into the state. So I can go to New York and I can buy a vehicle that has 7,501 miles on it, and I can bring it in and title it and register it in Massachusetts. And so it's going to create a bigger market for the used vehicles. So you're the ones that come off lease, the ones that come off of fleets, rentals, all those kind of things are going to probably have a much bigger market in those 10 states.
Well, they
would. And I'm just guessing that.
I thought of the fleet too, but if you get Hertz or Budget out there and they get 3,000 Ford 150s getting just over 7,500, that's going to raise the price of the used vehicle market tremendously, because they know what they've got. They can play the same game. Address Audrey's question here. She missed the reference to ICE trucks.
Yeah, Bernie answered that.
Internal combustion engine.
Yeah. Yes.
So
yes.
we're talking about ZEVs, zero emission vehicles, and ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine. Now, hybrids. People ask about hybrids. Hybrids do fit into this point system, but it's a little vague right now. So where that is, and that may be something that becomes more defined as we go along, because it really, especially when you get into heavier vehicles, the hybrid model works better. And so we may see the technology go that way if batteries and things can't make up the difference. And again, even if the batteries could make up the difference, you don't have the infrastructure to charge them. And so you've got to have a middle ground, and you've got to kind of get there, and without disrupting society and creating all kinds of havoc and all those kinds of things.
What about buying from a neighboring state, or is it based on the registration?
Okay, so when this goes into effect, you cannot import a vehicle into one of the CARB states. Okay, so until it's used, and in used, the definition of used is 7,500 miles or over. So I can't go and buy a new motorhome, buy a new pickup truck or commercial truck or whatever else in another state and bring it into Massachusetts. And if you go and look at the act and you look at the different rules, you'll see what they've narrowed it right down. They tell you this is what it means. And if it's mostly aimed at commercial people. So if I have a company, national company, and I have a fleet of vehicles, if that vehicle is going to be used primarily in, say, Massachusetts, it has to be titled and registered in Massachusetts. And so I can't I can't buy it in Indiana, right? And register it, title it there, and then drive it to Massachusetts and have it assigned to the Boston Metro. It doesn't work that way.
What about people that buy their unit and register it in North Dakota or Montana?
Well, there's people that do that. That's been going on for a long time, where you set up an LLC out there and whatever else. Here's the deal: that there are some legal implications to that. I don't want to get in the middle of it. But my thought process is there may be some people that start looking at that, states that start looking at that more intently than they do now, because more people might be doing it.
Right.
So just keep that in mind. And if it ends up back in the state and it spends most of its time back in the state, and they can prove that it ends up being a thing. So it's just something to consider.
All right. Ryan's are the older vehicles that fall into this grandfathered in?
So yeah, any vehicles that are currently on the road do not fall into this ruling at this time.
It's got to be something sold after the date that it's enacted, right?
That is correct. And so right now in Massachusetts, so here's the thing: they have put the emergency ruling in place. So as of right now, this ruling will not take place until the 2026 model year. Now they've had the hearings, and they've got written hearings till tomorrow, and then they've got 3 months to act on it. So if they come back and there was all this opposition and everybody said, absolutely not, you can't do this, they could push it back to the 2025 model year. I don't think they're going to do that. I think there's plenty of argument to say, yeah, we're just going to we need to put this off.
Well, while you're on that, let's address, and I'm surprised that it hasn't come up, maybe somebody has further down. We have this situation, and we've had it for years in the RV industry, that the model year of the motorhome may be, let's just say 2025, but the chassis under that motorhome could be a 2023, could be a 2024. How is these rules going to impact that? I listened to the webinar, but I'll let you clarify it.
So these rules have nothing to do with motorhomes. So just understand that they are not banning motorhomes. They are not of any class. This is about chassis specifically.
Right.
So what they're it's the year of the chassis that really is what they're looking at now. The final complete, and I can't be certain, like when you get to the final state. So if I have a 2025 motorhome that's built on a 2024 chassis, my certificate of origin is going to come from the motorhome manufacturer. And it's still going to say it's a 2025, but the VIN number of the chassis, because when you get to motorhomes, you have a VIN number and you have a serial number. They're two different things. So your VIN number is a chassis, your serial number is for your Winnebagos, your Newmars, whoever. It's still based on that VIN number. So they may call it a 2025, but the VIN number is going to have a code in it. It's going to say it's a 2024. When the rule goes into effect, basically the idea is that a dealer, and this has to do, consumers have nothing to do with this. This has to do with the manufacturer to the dealer. When the rule goes into effect, a manufacturer cannot sell a vehicle to a dealer that doesn't comply. At that point, the certificate of origin has to have for sale in Massachusetts, and it has to have the sticker on it, but not until the rule goes into effect. Anything they have on the lot, as I understand it, is grandfathered in.
Yeah, that's
right. They can still sell it. The other thing is dealers can sell motorhomes. So if I'm in California, I'm a California dealer, and let's say I'm on the border, right? So I'm a big super dealer, Paul Evert, something like that, right? And I've got all these motorhomes that I sell. Well, I can still sell motorhomes out of state. So, I can have a national or international business. I just can't sell to anybody in the state of California. And the same thing goes here. If I'm a dealer here in Massachusetts, I can sell it to somebody in New Hampshire or Connecticut, right? I just can't sell to anybody in state.
What's going to, this one just popped up in my head. What's going to happen with people like Camping World or Blue Compass that can't sell it to me in Massachusetts, but say go over the line to New Hampshire because we don't have that rule. That's completely legal, although they're not registering in New Hampshire. They come back in to register in Massachusetts.
Register in Massachusetts.
But
And they can't.
I can see some games being played there.
But they can't. Once you go to motor vehicle and you hand them the certificate of origin to title it and register it, they're going to say no. This does not say for sale in Massachusetts. Sorry, can't help you.
Yeah. All right. Let's. Jim Convoy is just apologizing for being late. Bernie Cullen, internal combustion engine. Walter, evening all. Sorry, late due to work meetings. Okay. James, sorry, very good. You already said that. Big one. Other than California, other states, 14 states include Connecticut. I don't know where you're getting that, Artie. I had a slide. I don't think Connecticut's on there. I don't think Maine's on.
Nope.
Massachusetts is on there. New York, New Jersey are on there. I had a slide. Let me just see something.
To be clear, signed a memorandum of understanding in 2020 to phase out diesel trucks. I don't know anything about that. That does not have to do with the CARB ruling. It doesn't have to do with this. If there was some other political thing that they did and they signed this deal to say, yeah, we're going to get rid of diesel trucks, that's separate from this.
Yeah.
That's not part of CARB.
And
I actually have some of the laws in here in my slide presentation that figures that out. But just to be clear, there are 10 states, and it isn't about diesel trucks. It's about emissions.
Yeah.
Cool.
So Ryan says, I don't think the grid of technology is where it needs to be for this to happen right now. We all know that. That's one of the big issues and one of the things we can hang the hat on if people pay attention to it. The battery life is affected by weight and weather so much. Many
good comments, Bob. It's 8:00.
Oh, man. Well, all right. God, let me see if there's anything. Our resident engineer, Ford Ranger EV due in 2027, 2028. And
Awesome.
Ford just reduced or shut down Lightning production. Yeah,
they reduced it quite a bit. Yeah. There's a lot of them on dealer lots that they haven't sold yet. Yeah, as I understand it.
Yeah, we're going to have to ask you guys to go back through and see what's what with. Let me do this. 1 second here. Boop. No, let me go here. Yeah, let me do this.
Yeah, Walter said battery supports the engine, but also heating, cooling, lights, all those kinds of things. So that's eating amp hours out of your batteries, when you're driving an electric vehicle. It's just, there's a lot to it.
Well, you know what?
That you end up getting into.
I'm going to suggest we kind of do a part 2 of this after the holidays, maybe in January. We see what it's about, and because there's a lot of interest. I put Chris's email up there. So Chris at DoughertyRV.com. And when you go to the site, sign up for his newsletter, get all the new stuff. He's done the site all over. And he is one of our best resident resources here in New England. Chris, thank you very much. I know you're busy with your own stuff. So this is good. I mean, we kind of talked a half hour of the stuff. We got about a good half hour of people's questions. Chris, what I would ask you to do is, we haven't done this for a while actually, but I would ask you to go back through the show next day or two or whatever and respond to those people that have questions that we just didn't get an answer to here. Sure. And if anybody has a question that we didn't cover tonight, because there is a whole lot more to this stuff, right?
Send it in.
Right, Chris, and he'll give you the answer, and then we'll schedule the follow-up in probably sometime in January. Battery support, but also
the big thing I want people to take away from this is, first of all, we're not on fire, right? So this is being pushed off. There are a lot of other interested parties that are saying we can't do this, that are big commercial users, things like that. There's an effect on the economy. There's an effect on municipalities. There's, certainly our industry is affected by it. We also have a new administration coming in that may try to change things. Now, these are state rules. So CARB is a state organization. These are individual states that take it, but it is a tie-in through EPA. Don't know where that can go. It's a moving target, right, guys? So right now, things are good. We're okay. It's just seeing where this is coming down the road and how it can develop. And that's why I think it's an interesting topic to spend a little time on.
Let me squeeze one more in here because it's from the camping industry. I'm not sure. It could be Cindy Zwerski. It could be Marcia Galvin. I'm going to guess that it's Cindy because she's now the executive director of MASS, but says, thank you. The RV show season will not see a problem. It's actually, Chris, you read it and tell us if it's right. If
RV show season will not see a problem this spring, winter, but we need to watch this closely as model year 26 arrives in Massachusetts and the other states. When the conversation began months ago on the adoption of the rule, it was referring to trucks with no mention of recreation vehicles. Look forward to common sense prevailing and the hold continuing to be extended due to lack of infrastructure. It's by class of vehicles. So it's class 2B to class 8. So it's across the board, and that's the important thing to keep in mind. Used vehicles, again, not involved. And to be clear, I don't know that I see a huge effect in the coming years on the RV industry. It may be that motorhomes can't be sold, but there's used motorhomes. And again, we're talking about 10 states. So there's 40 other states, right, that don't have these restrictions at this point. And so there'll be a used market. People will still have the vehicles that they have. I just don't, and again, your companies like Ford are still going to be able to push out pickup trucks because they have the zero emission vehicle stuff over here that's giving them the credits. So, all in all, I don't think there's big storm clouds or anything like that. Nope. But it's something to keep an eye on. And I kind of wanted people to understand this is what it is. And, the stuff I put in here, Mass DEP to date.
I know we're running over a little bit, but Ryan had a great comment. Great comment. Imagine plowing snow with an electric truck.
Absolutely.
With an electric hydraulic plow. I doubt you would make it through a sizable storm on one charge. Can you imagine that? And you said before, DPW is not covered.
Oh yeah. DPWs are not covered at this point, and so they're sitting there saying, "This is not something we can do." Now, you put enough batteries in the thing, yeah, you're going to get a certain amount of that, but for those of us who are on the RV tech side, right? You have motorhomes and fifth wheels and whatever else that have all hydraulics. It takes a serious amount of amps to still run those hydraulics, and that's not even really close to the size of a pump that's on a regular Meyer plow, for instance, or something like that. So yeah, I mean that's a real concern is those high amp draw things, and then you're taking that truck and now you're pushing all this weight of snow down the road. And so that's putting a lot more load on it, and you've got the sander on the back. It's, again, there are energy concerns that have to be worked on.
Yeah,
and it's cold out. So
and it's cold out. So charging them, there's another problem for you right there.
Since it's a government program,
32 degrees.
Maybe they'll do the same with this as they've done with the Real ID thing and just keep pushing it off and pushing it off and pushing it off.
All right.
Anyway, thank you, audience.
Yeah, you've been fantastic. Chris, thank you very much. It was a great discussion. We'll look at it again on January, and I will put the closing video up, and we will catch you guys.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, that's right.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Happy
a little bit of forewarning. We are having a show next week. I'm off next week. The next 2 weeks after that are Christmas and New Year's. We will not be doing a show on Christmas and New Year's. So we'll take a couple of weeks off at the end of the year. We got a show next week, and Bernie will be filling in for me, and him and John can figure out what they're going to be talking about. All right, guys.
Have a great day, everybody.
I'll be driving back to Boston. That's why I'm not going to be there. All right. Take
As the
care.
Queen of England says, ta-ta.
Ta-ta.
The Queen, yes.
Oh.
This edition of RVing in New England was a presentation of the New England RV Dealers Association. Thanks for watching, and be sure to like us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.